Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to learn about Heal All. So as a herbalist, I really try to pay attention to when plants seemingly pop up out of nowhere, or if the particular population of a plant explodes in 1 year. I have noticed that that tends to mean that there's going to be a need for that plant's medicine. So a really great example this year would be mullein. Mullein is showing up everywhere. When we were camping just last week, it was amazing how most of the campsites were just filled with these beautifully tall mullein plants. And another plant that is popping up everywhere is Prunella Vulgaris, also known as Heal All, or some people call it self-heal. And I'll show you what it looks like right here. So I'm actually standing in front of a huge patch. Like I said, she has exploded. She is everywhere. And so we're going to get a close look. Prunella Vulgaris will have a square stem, and it's going to have opposite, kind of like entire leaves. Now, if it's not on your lawn, as you can see, she can get quite tall. And so if you're working with Prunella that is on your lawn, you're really only going to want to take that first little flower and that tiny first little set of leaves that we saw. If you're lucky enough to find a beautiful tall patch like I have here, see, like here's a great example of one here, where we've got the first set of leaves, a second developed set of leaves, and even a third set down here. So you see there's 1, 2, and then 3 sets of leaves. When we have 3 sets of leaves like this, we can actually harvest below the second well-developed pair of leaves, and then I'll strip the leaves off and the flowering spike, discarding the stem, because like many plants that have a stem like this, you're not actually getting a lot of medicine in the stem. It's pretty inert, and so you don't want to kind of water down your medicine. So I've got lots of Prunella tincture in stock. So what I'm going to be making this year with this is an oxymel. I think once I tell you about the medicinal properties of Heal All, you'll understand why I want to have a variety of remedies on hand this year. So the first area I want to talk to you guys about in terms of medicinal properties for Prunella are its epithelial properties. This is an amazing vulnerary. So this is going to help to heal tissues. It's an antibacterial. So as you can see, infusing it in oil and using it for a salve of some kind would be fantastic. It's also an astringent, which is another property that we look for in terms of epithelial use. And it's a vascular tonic, meaning it's going to help to tone blood vessels. So for topical use, this is great for things like varicose veins and spider veins and deep tissue injuries. Oh, hello, bee. Another area where Prunella shines is its depurative properties. So this is a detoxifying plant that supports both the kidneys and the lymphatic system. So it's also going to be great for any conditions in both of those areas. So if you've got bladder or kidney, chronic issues, or chronic inflammatory issues of the lymphatic system, it's going to be great for that as well. And because it's a vascular tonic, now it doesn't really have any primary cardiac properties, but because it's a vascular tonic, it will be supportive in terms of cardiovascular conditions. This is also now you're going to see why it's called Heal All very soon when I tell you about all of these amazing properties. It's also a fantastic nervous system herb. So it is like a general relaxant and tranquilizer, but it's also an antidepressant and an anxiolytic. So it's going to help with all of that as well. I have to be very careful. I love my harvesting blade, but you've got to make sure you work slow and methodically. Now, last but not least, I would be remiss in not mentioning its antiviral properties as well as its fever modulating properties. It's also got some immune stimulating properties. So you can see why this plant would have been often used during like cold and flu type seasons. So there was one thing I forgot to mention, and that was the hemostatic properties of Prunella. So that would make this a really great plant ally to know how to identify. So before we finish this segment, I'll get my husband to zoom in close one more time so you can get a good look. You'd want to know this one for things like poultices and compresses because, again, antibacterial, it's vulnerary, and we know that now because it's a hemostatic, it's going to stem bleeding. So this would be a really good plant to know in terms of like emergency first aid. Of course, again, making it excellent for infused oils. Now, in terms of toxicity, there really isn't any, which is nice, but because it is a depurative plant, so again, a detoxifying plant, we're not going to use it or use it with caution during pregnancy and lactation. These are not normally times where we want to be doing any active detoxing. And as I have mentioned in all of my previous videos, and I will always drive this point home, if a plant does the same thing that a medication you're on does, then you really want to use it with caution. So in this case, in terms of medications that are antidepressant, anxiolytic, or any mood altering medications. So I am going to finish up harvesting here, and then I will meet you guys back in my kitchen. So we're back inside, and I have to admit, I'm really glad. We started off the year here in Southern Ontario as kind of drought-like conditions, right when farmers were putting all their seeds into the ground. We were dry, and now it hasn't stopped raining for like a month and a half. So the mosquitoes are horrendous. So if you have any tried and true mosquito remedies for your property, like those propane bug sucker things or bug zappers, and they actually work, no toxic stuff, guys, post it below. So I am now back inside and I have my little itty bitty Prunella plants to work through. So I want you guys to take a closer look again. If you're harvesting this off your lawn, it is highly unlikely you're going to get any plants of this height. Okay, so they're going to look a lot shorter, but I want you to see the process here. So what I do is I use my fingers and I run the opposite direction of the stem to pull those leaves off. Really easy. And then you can either use scissors or you can just pinch off the top one with your hand like that. So I'm going to do that for all of them that we've harvested. And once you get your hands on it and you feel that stem and how very fibrous and thick it is, you'll realize why you don't want it to be a part of your medicine. So I'm going to get to work, and once I have everything destemmed and ready to go, we'll get to the next part of oxymel making. So now that all the hard work of stripping the stems back is done, I'm going to get to chopping. Everybody always asks, this knife is called a mezzaluna. Definitely a worthwhile investment in terms of chopping your herbs. I get a lot of questions about food processors. Personally, I've never used them. The type of herbal medicine that I practice definitely involves a deep connection with the plant, and I find that once you start bringing in machinery, there is a disconnect. My only concern with a food processor might be pulverizing your herbs. So you want to pulse very, very carefully and make sure you're not making Prunella juice as opposed to actually finely chopping your plants. So I'm going to get to work. I want to roughly chop these because ideally you're going to want 2/3 of the way to all the way full with fresh herbs. Whenever we work with dry plant material, we cut that in half because we're compensating for the lack of water that dried herbs have. So Heal All, or Self-Heal, got its name because a long time ago, it was believed that this plant was sent by God to heal everything. Because as I said, like, think of all the amazing applications that this plant has. We talked about epithelial use, and I also believe that this would be a great plant for making a breast oil because it also has that lymphatic property in combination with other herbs. If you don't have a copy of my book yet, you can check out the links below because I've got over 70 herbal recipes, including oxymels and salves and ointments and liniments and all types of kind of home kitchen remedies that you guys can make. So I'll have that available below. Of course, this is going to help us with detoxifying. It's going to help support our immune system. So it's really just a beautiful, beautiful plant to get to know. Now, the reason I'm making an oxymel is because I have lots of tincture in stock. And I find oxymels are great whenever we're dealing with anything respiratory. So while this plant isn't specifically a respiratory plant, the action of the raw honey and the raw apple cider vinegar tends to loosen up mucus formation and get things moving. But in this case, it would help to quell fever, it would be antiviral, and it's also going to help boost the immune system. Most herbs that are lymphatic have properties in terms of immune stimulation because our white blood cells are in our lymph. So once we get this roughly chopped, like I said, we want to fill the jar either 2/3 of the way or all the way full. I'm definitely more folk medicine-like when I am making things like oxymels. It's really helpful to have something like a chopstick on hand because you'll see when I pour in the honey, it's going to need a little bit of coaxing to get to the bottom. I'm going to do equal portions of honey and apple cider vinegar. So regardless of the size of jar that you are using, you just kind of want to do equal portions. Now, if you've got blood sugar issues and you don't want to use a ton of sweetener, that's perfectly fine. You can use more vinegar than honey. Yeah, actually, in fact, you could just make an acetic if you wanted and just do straight vinegar. What I like about oxymels is that they make things taste really good. And if you've got picky kids, oxymels are a great way to get botanicals and herb-based medicines into your kids. All right, last step, get that last little bit in. So I'm about 2/3 of the way full, which is great. Now let me get this stuff out of the way. So I always add the honey first. And like I said, it's gonna need a little bit of coaxing to get to the bottom. So I'm gonna do about a cup, which might actually be not quite enough, but I'm okay to go a little heavier on the vinegar. Many of these folk remedies are, you know, very much in the world of ish. And I can't bear to get rid of this spatula. Even though the handle is broken, it's still my favorite one. Works really, really well. Do you guys have any of those kitchen implements that are kind of partly broken or a little bit wonky that you just can't get rid of? Let me know in the comments below. Mine is my wonky broken spatula. Yeah, and I can already see right now that I'll probably want a little bit more honey, so I'll probably do closer to 1.5 cups, and just a bit more. So oxymels don't have the same shelf life as tinctures, so you're probably going to want to use this up within a year, 1.5 years. Yeah, that's enough. And like I said, I take my chopstick and I just see how the honey is now kind of oozing and getting its way to the bottom. I just find this helps because if you pour the vinegar on top, it's just going to sit there. And that gets things moving really nicely. And then I will top up with raw apple cider vinegar. Now, I don't have everything here prepared in terms of a lid. Silly me. So you're going to want a piece of parchment paper. The parchment paper is going to act as a barrier between the vinegar and the lid, especially if you're using a mason jar, because the vinegar is going to eat away at the metal of that lid and it's going to corrode it. And then all of that is going to start oozing into your medicines. So you're going to want parchment paper in between the lid and the actual remedy. So as you can see, I've got my medicines all labeled. You always want to make sure that you label everything that you're making. I like to use painter's tape. It's really inexpensive and it's an easy way because they peel off really nicely too. So it's an easy way to label things. You're going to think you'll remember what's in there. Trust me, you won't. There was one time when we were moving from a townhouse out into the country and I found 4 liters of unlabeled tincture that I had no choice but to throw out. So definitely label your medicines and definitely include that parchment paper barrier between the lid and the oxymel. This goes true for tinctures as well, because the minute that lid starts to corrode, you're going to get metal flecks inside your medicine and you'll have no choice but to throw it out as well. I like to let my oxymels sit for at least 4 to 6 weeks, but to be honest, I won't press this likely until the fall. I don't like to press my medicines until I need them because then they're exposed to excessive oxygen. This is specifically true for tinctures. We like to take it by the teaspoonful. It's really nice in hot water as kind of a base for a tea, or adding it to your favorite tea as well. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And until next time, this is Correne from Spiraea Herbs, wishing you health and wellness.